So guys, in this next news story, members of a Burnley drugs gang have been given almost 100 years behind bars for taxing rival gangs by stealing their cannabis grows. In March 2022, the East Exploitation Team were tasked with investigating a gang in Burnley, headed by Joshua Watson and Robert Ganley, who were supplying substantial amounts of cannabis whilst also taxing Albanian gangs' crops by breaking into cannabis farms and taking the plants. Operation Alberta was an offshoot of an investigation named Operation Callaway into a shooting incident that took place on Salas Street in relation to cannabis taxing. In November last year, 8 members of a Manchester-based organised criminal group were jailed for more than 8 years following an investigation into that shooting. During the incident, which centred around the attempted taxing of £220,000 worth of cannabis in Salas Street, 2 people suffered gunshot injuries. 1 man suffered a serious head wound and vehicles were rammed. A car was set alight in an attempt to destroy evidence. The Operation Alberta suspects were sentenced this week to jail terms totaling off 90 years. Many others were given suspended sentences. Detective Chief Superintendent Nick Connaughton said, "People have their own views on cannabis and whether or not it should be legalised, which is their prerogative. However, this case highlights the sheer levels of violence associated with cannabis cultivation and the lengths organised crime groups are prepared to go to." He said, "I'm really pleased with the sentences handed down to these individuals, and I hope that it sends out a clear message that this kind of activity will not be tolerated on the streets of East Lancashire. If you do choose to engage in this behaviour, then you should expect to be arrested, prosecuted and put behind bars for a significant period of time." He said, "I'd like to thank all the officers and staff who worked so hard to achieve this fantastic result." So the following were jailed, and this is how long they were jailed for. So Callum Duffy, who's 27, he got 9 years and 3 months for burglary, supply of cocaine and supply of cannabis. Got Josh Watson, who's 30, from Burnley, supply of cocaine, supply of cannabis, he got 8 years. Robert Ganley, who's 29, of Burnley, got done for burglary, cannabis supply, cannabis production and money laundering, got 7 years and 6 months. Faizan Khan is 33, of Burnley, burglary, cannabis supply, cannabis production, 6 years and 9 months. Got Connor Shears, who's 23, from Colne, got done for cannabis supply, cannabis production, got 6 years. Kyle Snaith, who's 28, from Burnley, burglary, cannabis supply, cannabis production, 5 years and 7 months. David Leach, who's 30, got 4 years and 10 months. You got Michael Kent from Burnley, burglary, supply, cannabis, cannabis production, 4 years and 9 months. Michael Brennan, burglary, cannabis supply, you got 4 years and 7 months. David Valender is 51, cannabis supply, 4 years and 3 months. Jonathan Royal is 30, from Burnley, cannabis supply, cannabis production, possession of a taser, 4 years and 3 months. Carlis Pinkixis, who's 28, from Burnley, burglary, cannabis production, 4 years and 1 month. Stevens Forsyth, who's 45, from Burnley, cannabis production, money laundering, 4 years. Got Sean Mortimer, who's 43, from Burnley, 3 years and 6 months. You got Orphy Spahaj, who's 27, cannabis production, disqualified driving, 3 years and 4 months. Martin Crawford is 31, burglary, got 9 months. Liam Heaton is 28, cannabis production, 5 years, 11 months. And Aaron Pearce, who's 37, from Burnley, cannabis production, 3 years. And in this next news story, a FedEx subcontractor who stabbed a manager to death after he'd been told he was being suspended from work has been sentenced to 27 years in jail. In a trial that concluded a few weeks ago, the court heard how the 49-year-old Ronald Sekanjako flew into a rage after being told he was under investigation and attacked his manager, Philip David Woodcock, when he came to try and help calm the situation. Sekanjako had been called to a meeting with one of the warehouse managers on the morning of the 2nd November 2022, following concerns he had been filling up his work van at a local petrol station without having the means to pay. Sekanjako objected to these allegations and became irate, at which point Philip came to try and help. A jury at Sheffield Crown Court was told that as Philip took Sekanjako into his office trying to speak with him, Sekanjako slammed the door, closed behind him before stabbing Philip in the chest with a knife he had hidden in a jumper he was carrying. Officers later found a second knife concealed by a second Jacko in the officer and a hammer concealed down his sock. Despite the best efforts of colleagues at the FedEx warehouse in Rotherham, as well as police and ambulance staff, Philip was sadly pronounced deceased at the scene. Post-mortem examination later concluded that he had died as a result of stab wound to the heart. Following a Sheffield Crown Court trial which lasted 5 days, the jury deliberated for just over 2.5 hours before finding second Jacko guilty of murder, assault, occasional actual bodily harm, and 3 counts of possession of an offensive weapon. Second Jacko had been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 27 years for murder and a further 9 months for assault. The sentences are going to run concurrently. Following the conclusion of the trial, Philip's family paid further tribute to him. They said after a long and distinguished career, Phil was readying himself for quieter days away from the hustle and bustle of work. He was looking forward to a long and happy retirement, spending days with his wife and wider network of family and friends doing all the things he'd planned to do. On the 2nd of November 2022, all of our lives changed forever through a census act, the circumstances of which have haunted us as a family and many others since that day. We are tormented by imagining what our loving husband, dad and brother would have felt during his final moments, trapped, helpless and terrified. Our family has been left with a void that is impossible to fill. He was snatched away from us in the prime of his life, doing what he did most, which was helping others. As a family, we ask that our privacy remains respected. Detective Inspector Simon Cartwright, the senior investigating officer, said, "I am pleased that second Jacko had been handed a significant jail term which will see him spend a large portion of his life behind bars. He has shown no guilt or emotion throughout the whole of the investigation and trial, and by failing to own up to his actions that November morning, he has made Philip's heartbroken family and friends sit through a trial which saw the details of how he came to tragically lose his life told in detail. No one should ever go to work and not come home, and second Jacko took Philip's future and plans for retirement away from him and all who loved him. No sentence will bring Philip back, but I hope that the conclusion of the court proceedings today provides Philip's family some closure as they try to move forward with their lives." I just want to say rest in peace, Philip, and my condolences go out to your family. New story coming from West Midlands ways. A group of drug dealers operating between Leamington and Coventry have been jailed. Ricky Walker, Samantha Clues, Samir Abdul Raham and Lloyd Archer were all jailed for a combined total of more than 30 years. There's another defendant, Hamayun Mafozullah, and he's going to be sentenced at a later date. Officers from the Forces Priority Team investigating the group's activity, which included using their vehicles to run cocaine and heroin from Leeds to Leamington and Coventry and selling them in bulk to drug users. Camera footage caught Walker dealing in an alleyway and the rest of his associates, including Abdul Raham, using youths to deal drugs throughout 2020. In December that year, Walker was arrested while being carried in a car driven by Mafuzullah, with a substantial amount of Class A drugs being seized in the process. Following their arrest, a search was carried out at an address in Leamington being used by the group for drug dealing. During the search, items were seized, including phones, weighing scales, empty bags, and large amounts of suspected Class A drugs. Archer was arrested during this search and had been running the operation there on Walker's behalf. So the sentencing are as follows. Walker got 14 years and 6 months for conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. Clues got 6 years for conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. Archer got 31 months for conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. And Abdul Raham got 33 months for conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. Detective Sergeant Sarah Evans said, "This was a sophisticated system of drug dealing which relied on transporting vast amounts of Class A drugs across the region. This type of offending nearly always relies on the exploitation of vulnerable people, including those who transport the drugs and those who buy. Thanks to some excellent investigative work by the officers involved, we were able to break up and put an end to this group's network." So guys, here's a couple of stories coming out from the streets of the UK. It's your boy GT. Keep it locked, keep it real.